This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. Respectonomics is bringing you an offering of living economics. This is a bi-weekly production, and its purpose is to bring you current economic and financial conditions really to your front door. And we hope, that the rollout is practical, straightforward, and actionable. Now, before we go any further, some self-disclosure is a good idea. My name is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I am your voice of Respectonomics. This is, when we talk about economics, we have to talk a little bit in the current and a little bit in the future. The current context is that it's April the 6th, 2026, and I say my name is Jeremy. It's important for you to know that the team that supports me is supporting somebody who lives on a farm. We live on a farm, and we live in Canada, and we live approximately 200 kilometers north of Toronto on Georgian Bay. And the reason for this expose is because this filter that I'm looking through in terms of the economic outlook depends to some extent on one's own circumstance. Now, that's a very important point, one's own circumstance, because economics is from the Greek oikos and nemos. And the oikos means household, and the nemos is where we actually get the word nemesis from, and it's the meaning to manage, managing the household. So each of us manages our household in different ways, for different objectives, different environments. But the fact of the matter is each of us is an economist in our own right. Why this is important is because what we're going to talk about today is gas prices. And the gas prices today are right in front of us, and each of us will respond in different ways. We want to take a look at gas prices, though, in a sense that, as everybody knows, they have risen significantly. And we need, therefore, to look at this from the standpoint of what are we to do about it? Starting at the sort of almost the front gate, it is a panoramic view of inflation and affordability. Gas stations are very good at telling us what they are charging per litre or per gallon, and they will tell you whether it's gas or whether it's diesel. And as you're driving along, you say things like, oh, back at the other intersection, it was only another price. So we use gas prices not only comparatively, but we are also using them very optically. They are right in front of us. So when we say that gasoline prices are a panoramic view of inflation and affordability, they are like reminders, and they keep telling us, hey, the price has gone up and it's going to cost us more to continue and to live. From that straightforward exercise and the speed with which it's happened, and this very abrupt change in pricing is a significant component of our understanding of what we need to do about these gas prices. But the truth is then, we tend to get angry. How can this be happening to us? And of course, we go for the first throat that we can with throttle. We go for the big oil. We go for the Iranian debacle. And we think in terms of geography. I'll tell you one thing about geography that's interesting. It has been said that when we go into war mode, into battle, it's the devil's way of teaching us geography. I would surmise that most people hadn't actually thought of the Straits of Hormuz, let alone knew where they were. That's very significant because one of the findings that we're having is that there has been a great deal of complacency towards gasoline and energy generally. We assume it's always there. We turn on the lights, we fill up our cars, and the prices generally go up gradually, marginally, and we go through 2 days of fretting, and then we continue to pay the new price. This change has been very abrupt. And because of that, it's actually shaken us up. The message is, believe it or not, this message comes to you on economics, and the headline is The Blessings of These Higher Prices, which may surprise you. That's almost like when you're having a difficult time and somebody says, Oh, but have you thought of the good things? Well, we can do that, I suppose. But what we really want to do here is look at what do these gas prices truly mean? And we can look at it from 2 points of view, the demand side of the equation, the supply side of the equation. Let's take a look at the demand side of the equation, because when we encounter higher prices, we tend to demand less of that particular product or service. If you go to the dry cleaners and you find out they're charging $12 a shirt, you will tend to say, I will wash and press and iron my own shirts. So we are price sensitive in that sense. That what we then respond with here is one of them will be, of course, less driving. We will pool our cars, we'll think more about when we go into town or when we go on a trip, and we'll be more careful about how we drive. But one of the problems with this, there's a sort of contiguous sense of osmosis. And what happens is when we think in terms of driving less, we also believe in the sense of consuming less. So we become less minded. Now, some people, conservationists and activists, would say this is a good thing, and I'm sure it is. But the catch is, though, economically, that when we think of less driving and therefore less consumption, this can be injurious to the economy. We think in terms of less driving, we think in terms of using public transport. Too expensive to take the car, I'm going to take the bus. We've all been moving into fuel efficient cars, whether it's been mandated or whether it's a technological marvel, but we've all been moving into more efficient cars. So that one of the things we can say, if you're driving as we do, a hybrid, the hybrid, and it's not as good as the EV, but it does, in fact, the electric vehicle, that is, the hybrid does use less gasoline. Therefore, the cost of running it on an operational basis is less. And that's true for a lot of us. We've moved into hybrids, we've gone into smaller, more efficient engines, and so on. It's also raising this issue yet again of remote working, because clearly, when the price of gasoline is up, it costs more to commute. So that one of the physical responses is to demand or to expect that we will be able to work remotely, meaning working at home rather than traveling to the office. So those are the main things on the demand side of the equation: less driving, public transport, fuel efficient vehicles or alternatives even, and working remotely. The catch, as we've said, is that the concept of less driving may bring about a sense of less consumption generally. Let's look at the supply side of the equation. Now, I will admit to you, and I, in the full disclosure at the beginning, made clear that I am bringing this economic rollout to you from a Canadian perspective. But one of the things is we've got this wake up call. We now know that the gas prices are being affected by a battle that's going on some 6, 7,000, 10,000 kilometers away. It raises one issue. Canada is known to be the second, third, fourth, depending on your definition, largest owner of oil, carbon, hydrocarbon resources. So the question is, why are we not self-sufficient? Because if we were to be self-sufficient, if we had all the gasoline in our own domestic market and if we had access to new supplies when we needed them, one would expect then that we would be insulated from the world price. Well, the fact of the matter is we're not self-sufficient. And this raises probably the most important issue out of all of this. And that is we need to be self-sufficient. We need to be self-sufficient from the standpoint of just the physical crude oil. But we also need to be self-sufficient in the refining capacity as well. We've heard over the years numerous reasons, and they're probably quite correct. They're logistical, they're commercial, they're capitalistic. There's all kinds of reasons that we do not have refining capacity in the way that we could turn all the oil into gasoline and other derivatives, jet fuel, for example. The answer is that we haven't done it, and it seems likely that this Iranian problem is really a wake-up call. It's reminding us that we're not self-sufficient. It reminds us of our dependence on oil and gas and fuel generally. And it reminds us that we have not gone far enough in terms of alternatives. So let's just first of all deal with the issue of self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency is almost a contradiction to what we've seen in the last 25 years, which has been free trade. Free trade says you can do something better than I do, so you do it. I can do something better than you, so I will do it. And the idea is that one and one will make three. You would say to me, one and one makes two. Well, yeah, but when we both do it, we do what we're both more efficient at, then we get a cumulative, accretive advantage. That concept of free trade, however, impacts on us when in fact the price elsewhere goes up and immediately comes within our borders, as indeed has happened. Crude oil is up 40 odd percent. There's a semi sort of guideline that says price of oil goes up by $10 a barrel, it will create extra 40 cents per gallon. I think those figures go round and round in circles, and that's not really the point. The point of this discussion is introducing us to the concept of self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency in the actual oil itself, as well as in its refining capacity. If we're going to do that, one of the key issues is going to be transportation. How do we transport the oil? How do we transport the refined material? How do we engage in the whole concept of transportation, not only in terms of the energy itself and its derivative, but then, of course, our own transportation of being able to get somewhere in a method other than in one's car or truck. So transportation becomes a central theme. And this is a sort of political war cry. And that is when you live in a country that is dimensionally and geographically, topographically, as spread out as we are, transportation is key. Transportation refers to transporting goods, transporting people, transporting energy, which is really what we're focusing on, but also transporting information. And this whole concept of transportation brings us back to really the founding of Canada, but it also brings us to the point of the tremendous unity that comes about when we recognize the importance of transportation, of being able to move from one community to another, from one segment of the population to the other, in the way in which we can transport information, in brackets, education. The whole point is that transportation is a unifying concept, as indeed is this concept of self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency is a clarion call for unity. It may, in fact, not even be the beginning of unity. Maybe unity brings around self-sufficiency. But we need the self-sufficiency, we need the unity, and we need the transportation. And the political jab will be how little we have heard about either transportation or self-sufficiency. But in the concept of good economics, we need to do this. We mentioned a moment ago the issue of alternatives. There are two alternatives in a way that spring up. One of them is the alternative energy sources. And it seems reasonable, again, when you look at topography, when you look at ease of installation, is solar energy. And one of the things about solar energy is we say that we're a country that doesn't have as much light as, say, or sunlight as maybe, let's say, Saudi Arabia, ironically. But the truth is that the solar panels now can cover a broader spectrum of light to convert into electricity, into hydro. So therefore, solar is something that can be installed anywhere. On your own roof, for heaven's sake, on your barn roof, on the highways and the byways. They're easily installed and easily able to build into the grid. And the key behind building them into the grid is people say, well, it's sunny one day and dull the next. That's not going to be easy to monitor the hydro system, the grid. But in actual fact, the answer to that is that the technology is now allowing different sources of energy or hydro to be brought into the system depending on its availability at the time. So in a way, that's not really an answer or an excuse. Here's the other one, though. We've talked about solar as an alternative. The nuclear problem is its timeline. It's capital intensive as well. And it does have one nasty problem with it. It's wonderful, no question about it. It produces electricity, it's green, it's all of those things. But you're left with one outcome that's always nagging, and that is what do we do with the waste? We really haven't got that nailed down. Waste is something from every kind of fuel we use, is one that we have to deal with. The waste from burning natural gas, for example, the waste that comes from gasoline in your car, comes out of the exhaust. What are we doing with the waste? And it does, although we can talk about nuclear in the sense of its enormous capacity and its stability, and the fact that it works so well on a high volume basis, we should also be looking at coal. And before you turn this recording off, this podcast off, the point about coal is twofold. One is it's cheap. It's one of the cheapest ways of developing or producing electricity. But there's another part to it as well. And that is the technology that is available and should be more available to scrub the gases. We think in terms of catalytic converters on your car. You'd be mortified if you thought that pure nitrous oxide or carbon dioxide was belching out of the back of your car. You would say that isn't right. And the same thinking, of course, applies to burning coal. We need to be able to scrub the gases. I am not the technologist, I'm not pretending that, but I am pointing out from a point of view of national unity, from the standpoint of collaboration, from the standpoint of a unified approach, there's much to be said for looking at things like coal from the standpoint of can we use it without damaging the environment. So what we've looked at here is the supply and the demand for gasoline. We're looking at this through the filters, admittedly from a Canadian point of view, though I'm bound to say, we think, that what is true in Canada is probably true in many other parts of the world. Self-sufficiency would be one very desirable goal or purpose for most nations. When we talk about unity, we're living in a world that this whole gasoline problem has really come around as a result of disunity. So we can present a fine example and a fine template, a protocol to the world by exhibiting and involving ourselves in unity, where we don't look at another segment of the population or another geographical part of the country and think of it as being up or down or sideways, but rather being contiguous to our needs and to our proposals for living in prosperity and living reliably. I want to conclude with one comment about gasoline and the pricing of it and so on. We've looked at these issues of transportation. We've looked at the issues of self-sufficiency and unity. But when we look at energy, there is one part of the equation, if you will, that reflects very much on how we live. And that is, we think of the power that comes out of these energy sources. We think about how gasoline powers our cars, powers a generator, how it might power your lights. We think of all the ways in which it powers. But there is one power that we should also be looking at. Because once we recognize that we have been complacent about energy generally, we can also ask ourselves, have we been complacent about our own power, our own potential, our own ability to be to build our own capacity, in other words? And it's only to say a reminder here that if we're going to talk about self-sufficiency in a national formula, then I think we should also be looking at self-sufficiency under the heading of self-power within the individual. Respectonomics breeds the concept of restoring dignity, of dignity of the human being, dignity to the human being, and recognizing our own dignity. So the message today is, although thoroughly economic in its grounding and its proposal, it is also one that reminds us that we individually have a sense of power, a sense of self-sufficiency that we can bring to the table. This is your Living Economics for the week of March the 6th. One of two. There will be another one in a couple of days' time. If you have thoughts on this, if you have inputs, let us know. No man is an island, and this is under the heading of unity. We need all hands on deck. You can contact us at jeremy@respectonomics.com, jeremy@respectonomics.com, and let us have your feedback, your views, and so on. And also, if there's an opportunity to make a presentation, either in a speech or in a workshop or that kind of combination, then call us again, jeremy@respectonomics.com, because we're in the business of pushing these messages out that we believe will be, and hopefully are, a combination of being helpful and constructive. This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley, your voice of Respectonomics. This is Living Economics, and I rest my case.